Phantasy Star Online 2 is finally making its way to the West, almost 8 years after its initial release in Japan on PC. I'm a fan of PSO, sinking countless hours into episode 1 and 2 on the GameCube with my brothers back in the day when couch co-op was still a thing, so naturally, I was very excited about it being localized. And I know a lot of other people felt the same way because the servers were completely bombarded shortly after the closed beta started, which led to a 3-hour maintenance. But since this is a closed beta, I'm going to ignore it because stress testing is one of the many reasons to have a beta. Instead, I'll talk about everything else I've experienced during my time playing through Phantasy Star Online 2. So first and foremost, it's been a very long time since I've played any online RPG, and even then, I was a very casual hardcore kind of person. My favorite and the one I spent the most time on was Ragnarok Online, an MMORPG. I would theorycraft builds, figure out where to power level, and all that good stuff. But when it came down to it, I was pretty bad at the game. Basically what I'm trying to say is, this impression is coming from someone who is a complete newbie. I was quickly overwhelmed with PSO2 after completing the basic tutorial. There was a lot to learn and get used to. All of the foreign UI, terms, progression mechanics, gameplay loop, and classes. It was a lot to digest in such a short amount of time. I thought getting into Monster Hunter World as my first Monster Hunter game was overwhelming, but PSO2 takes the cake. The UI was clearly created with the PC platform in mind. Navigation through the menus was not intuitive, and I did things that I thought should have worked, but didn't, like trying to use the left stick instead of the D-pad. Switching between windows was also something I didn't know I could do until much later when I decided to actually sit down and figure it out. This caused some annoyance when I wanted to see what weapon augments did, but couldn't figure out how to get to that part of the UI to expand the menu. But after about almost half a day of playing, I was able to commit almost everything to muscle memory, and not have much trouble finding what I needed. While I didn't quite learn all I could have from the rest of the systems PSO2 has to offer, like weapon progression, class progression, client orders, quests, and cooking, it would have only been a matter of time. It's not impossible to pick up, but it can be demoralizing and a lot of work for someone who just wants to try out a new game. But this wasn't a deterrent for me because I really wanted to play some Phantasy Star Online with friends. And besides, learning new games on the fly is a pretty common practice for me. On the bright side, combat was pretty much what I expected it to be. It was more intuitive than everything else about PSO2, but it seemed like it would have a high skill ceiling. There were 6 slots for attacks corresponding to different buttons, but in the beginning it was very simple, and you only needed to focus on one attack. I really liked the just attack mechanic, which increases damage if I was able to time my attacks properly. It added another layer of interaction that makes combat a little less dull, at least when compared to PSO episode 1 and 2. Being able to swap between different types of weapons in the middle of combat is also helpful in that sense. Combat can be pretty fast paced depending on the situation, and it's nice that weapon swaps are not too disruptive to the flow. That's pretty much all I have to say for gameplay, so that leaves the story. I typically don't pay too much attention to the story of a multiplayer game because I play them to play with friends. What I do look for is gameplay that would create a fun experience to support that. I also wasn't able to get through all the story missions because of time, but from what I did see, it wasn't that interesting. I really liked the sci-fi setting, but everything else didn't appeal to me. Not the Falspawn corrupting the universe, and not the arcs fighting them. That's not to say that it's bad though, just that the universe in peril trope is super cliche. One thing that did stick out though was how jarring the story missions were. Each mission is selected from a menu that usually just contains a short cutscene and maybe a quick boss encounter. Each cutscene can take place in a different setting, which causes a jarring experience, especially when a character is in one area, then suddenly they're in another without much context. I would have expected something a little more interactive, like running through a level and meeting the characters. But again, it's not a deal breaker for me. In the end, I didn't get too far into the beta, clocking in at about 11 hours or so. I didn't get to experience as much as I wanted to, but I really liked what I played. There are many ways to customize characters through skills and class ability trees on top of being able to change classes on the same character, which not many games offer. I'm sure there were many more cool things I could have done in combat once I got strong enough too. It would have also been nice to try out more classes outside of the Hunter and Fighter, but they fit my kind of in-your-face aggressive playstyle, so I stuck with them the whole time. But besides just having the good old daily grind, PSO2 offers other activities to do while hanging out with friends, like chilling at the casino playing some minigames or decorating your personal room. Every second I was playing PSO2 was a fun experience, whether I was playing alone or playing with friends. But as someone who has sunk hundreds of hours into PSO Episode 1 and 2, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising I would like PSO2, since it still has the feel of a PSO game, but with more improvements and systems in place. I just hope the microtransactions won't be too overbearing and kill what could be a really fun game, since it's releasing with the free-to-play model. Well, only time will tell.